Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you so very much for taking the time to tune in and listen. I do appreciate you. As always, feel free to reach out, Jeff at beekeepingfornewbies.com, and feel free to check in with the Discord room. It's Beekeeping for Newbies, that's NEWBEES.com. So just like you would spell beekeepingfornewbies.com. And about halfway down, I think there's a link for the Discord room. We got over 100, about 110 members in there now. Love to have you in there chatting with us, so please feel free to join us there. I kind of recently did a little bit of work and discovered that the Beekeeping for Newbies, NEWBIES people are getting a whole lot of free advertising from us. So let's try to take that market share back. But hey, I do want to run a quick special thanks to the patrons here, to Mary, Adam, Candace, Susie, Michael, David. Thank you all so very much for all your contributions. It makes a huge difference in allowing us to create quality content and to keep putting things out on a regular basis. Got a couple of announcements here. The first one is, by the time I actually release this, I will be home. But right now, I'm down here in Tornado Alley here, trying to avoid the hail and all the mess that's going on down here in the south this evening. So hopefully we won't have any power issues or anything else happen while we're recording today. But I'll definitely be home in a couple of days, and looking forward to that. But the announcements that I have, so as part of being a patron, you get your birthday announced. Mary just celebrated her birthday last week, so Mary, happy birthday to you. I am not going to do the Marilyn Monroe version of that, but I do hope you had a great day. Also, last weekend was the Virginia State Beekeepers Association spring meeting. This was at Sweetbriar College just outside of Lynchburg, Virginia. And I tell you, I've heard of the school. My mom had a friend years ago who I guess was on the board down there and found out my mom had a granddaughter and wanted her to go there. And so that was when I first heard of Sweetbriar. But it's an all-girls school down there in kind of south central Virginia. And beautiful campus. I mean, it was really impressive. They had a nice apiary, a vineyard, big fields. It just had a very, very relaxed kind of atmosphere to it. So that was a great venue that the Virginia State Beekeepers Association selected. So really glad we were able to be there for that. It was super awesome to see Adam, Candace, and Mary, people who are, well, of course, they're patrons, but they're also members of the Discord as well. And they've been following along, and we've had a lot of communication with them over the past, I think a couple years now for some of them. So it was really good to see everybody. And a special congratulations to Adam and Candace. They passed their first of 3 beekeeping certifications as apprentices. On that note, they will now be bossing me around and bullying me because they are certified and I am not. So I guess the pressure's kind of on. We'll have to see if we can get into a race to the master here. I don't know. I kind of gave up on that idea a long time ago because it just seems so academic, but I got to kind of suck it up and make it happen. So we'll get to work on that, and I'll try and see if I can be a better beekeeper. But on a more serious note, though, I really did enjoy the meeting. It was so great to see so many, smiling faces there and bee people all over the place. And I had the opportunity to spend a little time with Brooke Savage in the apiary. She did a nice little overview on treatments and treatment methods and kind of some pros and cons of those methods. And it was, anytime you can get into the apiary, it's always a good time. So it was really good to see all the hives they had there and just chat with everybody and just, I can't say enough good things about it. It was really fun. All right, it's time to get down to business. So, it's a challenging thing when you're trying to pick out the types of bees that you want to keep in your apiary. I think that when I was first starting out, the information I had was relatively generic. It was, well, go find some bees somewhere and order them and they'll ship them to your house, or go pick them up. But nobody really kind of dove into a lot of the pros and cons of the different types of bees that you can actually keep as a hobbyist or commercial, either way. So I think probably the simplest way to tackle this is to just start by acknowledging, there are over 20,000 species of honeybees in the world. In an effort to get to a 2-hour podcast, I'm going to read all 20,000 of them. So we'll just start running down the list right now, and we'll get started here. If you don't want to hear the whole list, just fast forward the podcast to the 12-minute and 40-second point, and that's where I'll be done with the list. No, I'm not going to do that to you guys. Let me stop you before somebody actually fast forwards. I'm not going to read all 20,000 of them there. But when you think about, and I'm not a biological expert here, but you got, your kingdom, phyla, species, all those other categories. I know somebody's going to be making fun of me right now for saying that. But the bees that are kind of most common that we see here, like in North America or in the U.S., where a lot of us are keeping bees, is the western honeybee. So, the western honeybee has then like a subspecies from there where you start to see some of the other ones that are more common, like the Italians and, the Russians and some others. But like I said, nobody really ever sits down and kind of has the discussion, or at least they didn't for me. That might be a better way to say it. Like maybe if you're in a bee club or you actually have a mentor who's really helpful and they're doing their due diligence with you, maybe they sit down and kind of walk through them. For me, the biggest driver for the choice of honeybee that I ended up going with, which is Italians, that's what I've pretty much done exclusively for the most part, was because that was what was available. I mean, Italians, there were multiple apiaries and people out there selling packaged bees that were Italians. They were easy to get a hold of. They were pretty competitively priced. So that's kind of the route that I went. So I think it would probably make the most sense instead of thinking about the kind of bees you might like to keep. It might be a better idea to think about or maybe research the types of bees that are successful and that thrive in your area. So as an example, I might want to keep Russian bees, but maybe living in like Naples, Florida wouldn't be the best for them since they're known to be, a bit of a hardier bee who tolerates the cold really well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't successfully keep them in a differing climate, from what they're typically accustomed to or what you might typically find them in. But as a new beekeeper, in my opinion, one of the most important things you should be attempting to do in all things, beekeeping really is just play the odds, right? Think of it like a blackjack player, right? If the dealer is showing a 5 or a 6 and you have cards totaling 11, this might be a good chance to double down, right? If you get one single card, it's a face card, you have 21, but if it's a 7, 8, or a 9, that's not bad either, right? So you're just trying to play the odds in your favor. So why would you want to play like a low probability hand, and get something that really doesn't do well in your area? And this is, again, where talking to other beekeepers and people in the bee club, they'll tell you what they have. Now, what I'm finding, in the dialogue that I have with a lot of people and the discussions I'm having, there is a lot more diversity of bee types than I really thought. I mean, I just thought that kind of everybody was down to like one or two different types and that most people were just keeping, one subspecies of bee, like they're doing maybe just Italians or maybe Italians and something else. I'm seeing a lot of people that are having 3, 4, 5 different types within the apiary. And I think that that introduces some kind of really interesting things. I mean, there maybe are some genetic challenges with that when you have so many different types of genes within that pool and trying to figure out which ones are the best and the most productive for the objectives and the things that you have and the types of bees. Going back to like the traits that we talk about or the characteristics of those bees that we want to have when we think about the ability to overwinter, honey production, temperament, hygiene, all those other things. I think it's a little bit more difficult maybe to fine-tune that when you have so many different types of bees. But if I could do it, I absolutely would. If I were in a position right now where I could have 5 or 6 different types, I would do it just to be able to see how they behave, how they interact with each other, what's different one across the other. If you have the ability and the resources and the land, or even if people in other places where they might be 5, 7 miles away and you can move bees from one place to another and see how they interact and breed in those other places versus being within your apiary. Again, like all kinds of cool stuff you can do, but I'm running off on a tangent here. So how do you figure out, which ones are going to be the right ones for you, right? So I'll bring that back to, what I discussed earlier here, talking about, those 5 traits, right? Let's kind of focus in. So you got your ability to overwinter, right? This is a big deal. We talk about hygiene. Hygiene is a big, component around the reduction of illness. It's a big component around varroa, right? There's the whole thing with varroa of the, being varroa sensitive kind of hygiene or varroa resistant. I mean, that's a whole kind of discussion in and of itself. But talking about your tendency to swarm, your temperament, your honey production. From here, I think you can even go into other categories based on your geography and maybe talk about tolerance to heat or cold or other things. So as we kind of go through this list of, some of the more common subspecies of bees, you'll notice that some of them have some really great characteristics in some areas where they might score, as an example, like a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. but then in another area they would score a 1, right? I mean, I can say no matter how many 5s a bee type would have or is advertised to have, if they're a 1 in their ability to overwinter, they're not coming into my apiary, right? That still, for me, is always number 1, unless there's some sort of a breeding plan in place to somehow selectively breed for certain characteristics and not have to have them die every winter, which, that by itself really brings up, and I've been having a lot of these Varroa discussions lately, and, it goes back to, I think, early in my beekeeping years, one of the biggest problems I was having was overwintering with a lot of my package bees. And, I just kept thinking, well, it's just they're just not making it. The genetics are bad. But then you start realizing, well, yeah, I mean, no, I didn't treat for Varroa. I mean, that's not going to happen. It's the whole that's not going to happen to me kind of syndrome, right? I wasn't treating a couple of them early on, and I didn't realize just how serious it was. I didn't understand as a new beekeeper that when you have bees that have Varroa, it's not necessarily the mite that's killing them. It's all the viruses and all the other things that they carry along with them that, that weakens the bees and makes them more susceptible to illness and makes them not able to be themselves and to be as productive. So anyway, once again, here I am again in Tangentville. But that hygiene is, like a big deal. Anyway, so quick note here as I go through this list. Like I mentioned, I've really only kept Italians. I did have a situation where the bee club was offering, I guess somebody who was a Saskatraz breeder had offered to sell some to the bee club, and I think they were about $35 a piece. I ordered 2. I think I had just hit like 50 hives at this point in my beekeeping journey, and I bought 2 Saskatraz queens, and I went ahead and I requeened 1 colony. And I'm trying to remember this if I got this right here. So I think there was a swarm, and I went ahead and requeened them at that point in time. And you have that kind of difference sometimes between a virgin queen, a mated queen that's in a cage and has been there for a while, and then a laying queen that you just took off of a comb, right? Right out of a colony. That queen, when she is not actively laying for 6, 8, 10 hours, whatever it might be, basically a full day, that level of pheromone in her body is going to actually start to reduce a little bit until she's actively laying again, which brings us back to why we've talked about those, pushing cages sometimes for queen introduction. Well, I take this Saskatraz queen out, and I'm like, hey, let's go ahead and get her in this hive. I'll just direct release her because that's going to be a really good idea. So I put her on the top of the frame right around like frames 5 and 6, drop her on there, and they balled her before I could get my hands on her to kind of save her. So that was $35 that, down the drain pretty quick. The second one, I did get that into a colony as well. I did a split. I put the split into a 2-frame nuke, put the queen in there. Everything was going great. She had a beautiful brood pattern. I was really excited. I don't know exactly what happened. I kind of turned my back on them for a couple of weeks, and being that they were in a 2-frame nuke, they swarmed really quick, and she left me. So those are my only experience really with those 2 Saskatraz queens right there, so I can't even speak to how good, bad, or indifferent that they might be. But anyway, my target, I think, is maybe somewhere by like the spring of 25. I expect personally to have probably 4 to 5 different types of honeybees in my apiary, but not any sooner than that unless there's some kind of an act of God. Okay, so everything that I'm about to pass along here with regard to the types of bees is on information and data provided by someone else. I am keeping track of the links and the resources that I've used to find this information, so if anyone wants more information, you can drop me a note on AOL Instant Messenger or ICQ. You can send a self-addressed stamped envelope, whatever you want to do, and I'll just mail it to you. Whatever is easier for you guys. Just jump into the Discord or shoot me an email, jeff@beekeepingfornewbies.com. I'm going to post it in the Discord so everybody there can see the resources as well. Full transparency, because of the fact that I'm not an expert in every type of bee. I just went out and did the research to hopefully save you all some time so you don't have to do it, and I can kind of take that burden off of you. Okay, so number 1 on the list, famous for being both sassy and originally from Alcatraz, we have the Saskatraz. But in all seriousness, this is from a project started in 2005. So when they were first started out the project with the Saskatraz subspecies, they were decimated by Varroa in 2 years. They then brought in some Russian and German bees, which is where the Saskatraz of today that we now know was born. So I would strongly encourage anyone who wants to learn more about these to go to saskatraz.com. So I'll spell it phonetically for you. It's Sierra Alpha Sierra Kilo Alpha Tango Romeo Alpha Zulu.com. There's a wealth of information there with regard to the various genetics and the way that they're breeding them and what they're offering mated queens and just generally very informative. So they're a very hygienic bee. They are varroa resistant and they're very resistant to brood diseases. Very strong in their ability to overwinter, even down to sub-zero temperatures, and excellent honey producers. So these are very near the top of my personal list for when I really start ramping things back up again, at a date to be determined later on. Okay, I would say number 2, one of my favorites, and it's not my favorites because of my vast knowledge and experience on them, but it's my, I used to watch a lot of those videos from University of Guelph and Paul Kelly up there in Canada. I want to say Ontario. I apologize if there's anybody up there who I mislabeled you and you're not Ontarian. But I'm pretty sure it's Ontario. But it's the Buckfast bee. So these are originally from Buckfast Abbey in the UK. They were raised by Brother Adam. There is a good book. I think it's called Beekeeping by Brother Adam or something like that. I actually posted the name of that book recently. That was a fun book. Learning about what Brother Adam did there. And the Buckfast bee, it's alive and well, very prominent in a lot of places. Up in New England, up there around I think Nova Scotia and Ontario, and I think that whole area in the Northeast is pretty prominent, as well as, of course, over in the UK. But they're known for being very gentle. They're resistant to tracheomites, low tendency to swarm, very efficient use of winter stores, and excellent honey producers. So definitely go check out. You can just do a Google search or DuckDuckGo or whatever your browser of choice is, and just search for University of Guelph. This will be Golf Uniform Echo Lima Papa Hotel. And Paul Kelly on YouTube. Paul Kelly is the guy. I don't know what his official job title is there at the university. He puts out a ton of content. I know a lot of people who have been to Hive Life. They had a chance to see him speak at Hive Life last year. So I think that he's a tremendous resource and puts out so many great videos. I've learned a lot from him myself. Definitely a good use of your time with any of the content that he puts out. So I'm really, really hoping someday to get some of them in my apiary. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, the next one on the list here, fan favorite for many here in the U.S. is going to be Italian bee. So from my experience with them, I'd say they're mostly on the gentle side. Although I've had a few ornery colonies over the years, which is to be expected. Most of my issues that I've had with Italians were really just kind of rookie mistakes, things that I did wrong or mistakes I made early. It's poor management, 100%, my fault, I think. The challenges I've had with my Italians were things like not feeding. Whenever I start a package bee, I've talked about this a million times. I love to feed the package bees just because you drop them drop them from the package into the hive, and then you get 2 or 3 days of rain or some bad weather or some cold weather, a little cold cold spell sets in, and then they're in there starving, basically. It's a really, really vulnerable time for them. They've been under a tremendous amount of stress being shipped to your house, and now they've got no food because you took that little jar of sugar syrup or a little can of sugar syrup that came with them. You've taken that out, and they have nothing. Right, so it's just small things like that. But outside of that, they've overwintered pretty well. And when I'm treating them and I'm taking good care of them, I'm not having any issues with them. I still have a few of them around right now, and no problem at all. No complaints. They're producing honey very well. They're still trying to swarm every spring. I wouldn't say that they have a greater tendency to swarm. Pretty average, I guess I would say. But it all kind of comes down to your management. If you're aggressive about getting those honey supers on early, and really that kind of goes for just about any bee. People always say oh, well, I don't like these bees. They swarm on me all the time. Well, if they run out of space, that's kind of what they do. So just kind of try to manage that as best you can. But they can usually find a way to sneak a swarm in on me here if you're not paying attention. But the genetics that I currently have are strong, and they just keep killing it year after year. They're really, really low maintenance right now, which is why I want to get in there. I wish I was about 2 months back. I wish it was like the first week of April right about now, because I would really, really like to graft off of some of these colonies that I have and crank out about 100 queen cells. But we're a little late in the game for that right now. But they've been pretty good to me overall, but, now that I have a decent handle on managing them. But I'm definitely ready to branch out and try some new types here. So the next one on the list is here in the U.S. is the Carniolan. So they're known for being big honey producers, higher tendency to swarm because of that, rapid honey production. They're considered one of the calmest species of bees or subspecies of bees, considered to be gentle, non-aggressive, fairly tolerant of their beekeepers. They definitely have the ability to defend the hive against many insects and pests. They are resistant to some parasites and diseases that may debilitate or cause challenges for other subspecies of bees. They can be kept in populated areas. There's a lot of folks who like to do urban beekeeping. And if you haven't checked out that episode, feel free to go back to the Bees and the D episode there. I haven't checked in with Brian in a long time up there, but I hope he's doing well. But they're doing some pretty cool and exciting things up there in the bee community with a lot of urban beekeeping. Anyway, they experience less drift between hives because they have a greater sense of orientation, which I think is pretty neat. Like I wonder how how much testing that you do and how you test the bee's ability to orient, and I feel like that would be kind of a fun, PhD kind of project or something like that. They do have a tendency to kind of gather nectar on cooler and overcast days where, other bees may stay in the hive and wait for weather conditions to improve. And they'll also, forage a little later in the evening and a little earlier in the morning compared to many other species of bee. Okay, so I make a lot of jokes about these bees, and maybe sometimes in the Discord. I think somebody in the Discord actually has some in her apiary. That's kind of the reason why I wasn't going to bring it up, but since we're talking about it, that's actually the reason that she's on the international no-fly list, because once she told us that she keeps Russian honeybees. Yeah, that's right. But no, they display some excellent hygienic behavior, and they do help deal with pests pretty well. They're much better at handling varroa than a lot of other honeybees are. It's actually been found that they are more than twice as resistant to them overall, and are much more aggressive towards a mite infestation. Interestingly, they have the ability to know which mites are female in capped brood cells, and they will uncap them. It not only removes the active mites, but it also works to keep the population down over time with fewer females who can kind of contribute to the reproductive efforts of the mites. So they're very aggressive towards hive beetles. They are less prone to American foul brood. Definitely a high tendency to swarm. They do well in colder climates, but unfortunately they are a bit more aggressive. So you will have to sacrifice that gentleness in order to get all those other great things that I just listed above. But if you happen to jump into the Discord, look up Root, R-O-O-T. She's got some Russians. She can kind of share her experience with them. I know she's had some challenges with swarming and some of their aggressive behavior. And I think there might be even a couple other folks who have some Russians in there as well. So jump into the Discord and ask a few questions. Now, number 6 here. So I'm not going to mention this one. I had a joke that I was going to say, and I recognize that a lot of stuff that I think is funny is not stuff that everyone else thinks is funny, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So I'm not going to say what I was going to say, but the next bee is the Caucasian honeybee. Now, this is kind of where it gets a little bit fun here. Now, follow along here with me at home. Here is a quote from the University of Delaware. Caucasian bees are sometimes described as the gentlest of all honeybees. They are dark-colored to black with grayish bands on the abdomen. Okay. Now, from homesteading.com. Overall, however, we wouldn't recommend the Apis mellifera caucasica maybe, to beginners. Firstly, they are prone to infections. You'd have to check up on them at least once a month to ensure they aren't showing signs and symptoms of any disease. Secondly, they are quite aggressive. Even with a bee smoker, it would take a few minutes for these bees to settle down, especially if they get riled up and threatened. Lastly, they are relatively slow in building their colony. Only an experienced beekeeper would be able to stimulate procreation and honey production. So in case you happen to miss it, I'm just going to recap the highlights here. Caucasians, this is from University of Delaware, Caucasian bees are sometimes described as the gentlest of all. And then homesteading.com. Secondly, they are quite aggressive. So clearly we have some contradictions in information here, but I'll continue on. So Caucasians are inclined to drifting and robbing, but not excessive swarming. The colonies normally do not reach full strength before midsummer, and they conserve their honey stores somewhat better than the Italians do. They also forage at somewhat lower temperatures and under less favorable climatic conditions than do the Italian bees, and are reported to show some resistance to European foul brood. Caucasians are available, but not common. Recommended for experienced beekeepers, can be a bit more aggressive and prone to infections, can also be slow to build up their colonies. So I think to summarize on that one for the Caucasians, they're aggressive and very gentle. They create a lot of propolis and have some tendency toward infection and low honey production. From the pictures that I saw, they look very cool, but I don't think they're going to be the right ones for me. So I'm going to recommend to you all, you may want to consider something else here as like a first-time beekeeper, newbie, in your rookie or maybe second season. It might be best to look at something else. Well, everyone, I know this was a very high level, for the different types of bees we discussed today, but hopefully you found it to be useful, as you consider what types of bees and genetics that you want to bring into the apiary. Try to find out what others are doing in your area, and equally as important, what have they tried that did not work well, and of course what is working well, and and outside of that, I believe you should really focus on bee types that do well in your region. Start looking towards the traits that matter to you, individually as a beekeeper, like honey production, tendency to swarm, temperament, hygiene. Like for me right now, honey production really isn't my priority. And because I would prefer to be doing instruction and teaching and helping people, with some hands-on things, temperament's really important to me. Hygiene is important to me. I'm not as worried about the tendency to swarm or honey production. I can kind of manage those. But, the hygiene is critically important when it comes to varroa and other disease and illness, and, of course, temperament. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you very, very much, again, for taking the time out of your day to listen. And, as always, just feel free to drop me an email, jeff@beekeepingfornewbies.com. And, like I said, join us on the Discord. It's just Beekeeping for Newbies, NEWBEES.com. And there's a link right there to the Discord server is on that page. And I am not sure off the top of my head what the next episode is going to be. I've got notes going on for probably 4 or 5 different episodes. I'm working right now to try and see if I can hire someone here who might be more of like a podcast production person who can help me organize things a little bit. Because as you can probably tell from anything that I put out, there's a lot of chaos involved in that. So hopefully I can get them on board and get them to commit to doing a little bit there to get some order to my chaos. But in the meantime, we'll just have to keep plugging along. And I look forward to talking to everybody in the Discord. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Be kind to one another. And don't do anything I would do. Talk to you soon. Take care.